The polished brass knocker struck the heavy mahogany door. Thwack, thwack, thwack! A rhythm Daniel Sterling was used to imposing, not hearing. He stood on the grand portico of Oakhaven Manor, his arm slung possessively around Seraphina Vance, the scent of expensive champagne and illicit secrecy clinging to them both. He was about to usher his mistress into what he believed was a temporary, luxurious sanctuary, a fantasy world stolen from his pregnant wife, Clara. But the woman who answered the door wasn't the caretaker. She was statuesque, radiant, and 7 months pregnant, her gaze steeling itself into a silent, lethal weapon. The air, thick with the promise of romance, instantly curdled into the bitter taste of utter, life-altering ruin. Daniel felt the smile drain from his face, realizing too late that the dream home he thought he'd secured for his affair was, in fact, the meticulously constructed golden cage of his own downfall. The late afternoon sun, filtered through the exclusive tinted windows of their penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago, cast long, deceptive shadows across Clara Hawthorne's face. At 7 months pregnant, she possessed a luminous, almost ethereal quality, but the light couldn't quite erase the faint, perpetual shadow beneath her eyes. The penthouse, a testament to her husband Daniel Sterling's success in high-stakes corporate acquisitions, was often referred to by glossy magazines as a golden cage, a term Clara had once dismissed but now found hauntingly accurate. Every piece of art was museum-grade, every throw pillow designer, but the space was sterile, devoid of the warmth that turns a house into a home. Daniel was the epitome of the modern mogul. Sharp suits, sharper instincts, and an aura of effortless command. Their marriage, 6 years in, was built on a foundation of shared ambition that had long ago replaced true affection. Now, with the imminent arrival of their first child, Clara felt Daniel pulling away, not just physically, but spiritually. He was perpetually on the phone, his voice a low, urgent drone. His late nights at the office had become the norm, punctuated by vague excuses about hostile takeovers and impossible deadlines. The excuses, once believable, now felt threadbare, like a poorly maintained facade. Clara, a former interior designer turned successful, if discreet, investment consultant, was acutely aware of the shifting landscape. She hadn't been idle during their marriage. Daniel often underestimated her because she chose to manage her wealth. The substantial inheritance from her late grandmother, supplemented by her shrewd market moves, separately and silently. He assumed her accounts were merged with his, managed by his firm, or simply existed as a secondary fund. He was wrong. Her private portfolio, managed through a discreet firm in Switzerland under her maiden name, was not only separate but increasingly more robust than Daniel's publicly traded assets, which were currently tied up in a risky, leveraged buyout. She sat now, cradling a mug of herbal tea, running her fingers over the ultrasound photo tucked into her pocket. The child was the only thing that truly mattered anymore. She had tried to talk to Daniel, to bridge the growing chasm. 2 weeks ago, she'd cornered him just as he was tying his silk Hermes tie. "Daniel, we need to discuss the future. The baby is coming. We need warmth, not this cold marble fortress." Daniel hadn't looked at her, his focus entirely on the knot. "Clara, please. The future is secured. We are Sterlings. We don't settle for warmth. We settle for opulence. I'm closing the capstone deal, and then we can talk about baby-proofing. I was thinking," she began, the idea she'd been nursing for months finally escaping, "about Oakhaven. Oakhaven Manor, a sprawling, century-old estate outside the city, set on 30 acres of rolling hills. It was a local legend, a magnificent architectural anomaly, a Queen Anne-style mansion known for its breathtaking formal gardens and its sheer, almost impossible privacy. It had been on the market for over a year, priced aggressively, but Clara had secretly been following the listing for $5. Daniel snorted, slipping on his cufflink. Oakhaven? Are you serious? That place is a liability, Clara. It needs millions in maintenance. It's a money pit, a museum. We are modern people. It's private, Daniel. It has room for horses, a nursery that faces the sunrise, and it's far enough away from the city that she almost said, your mistress. Your corporate drama won't bleed into our family life. Absolutely not. It's Gothic. It's too far, and it's a disastrous investment right now. End of discussion. I'm late. He kissed her forehead, a perfunctory, distant peck, and was gone, the heavy door clicking shut, sealing her back into the golden cage. That conversation was the final confirmation Clara needed, not just of his disinterest, but of his dismissiveness of her judgment. He thought she was merely the pretty wife who handled the social calendar. He had no idea she was the architect of her own financial security. That evening, Clara made the call. She didn't call Daniel's usual real estate agent. She called Ms. Evelyn Shaw, the exclusive agent for Oakhaven, whom she had cultivated a relationship with over months. Evelyn, Clara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The capstone deal is giving Daniel fits. I need to move quickly and quietly. I want to put in an offer on Oakhaven, sight unseen, full cash. Mrs. Sterling, Evelyn breathed, clearly shocked. The price is still... I know the price. I also know the sellers are desperate to close before the end of the quarter. I want the offer submitted anonymously through my shell corporation, Aegis Holdings. I want the closing date set for next Friday. It needs to be clean, immediate, and utterly untraceable back to the Sterling family, or even the Hawthorne family, until the deed is signed and sealed. Aegis Holdings, Evelyn repeated, scribbling a note. Understood. No paper trail to Daniel. Total confidentiality. Yes. And Evelyn. Clara paused, her eyes finally finding the cold reflection of her own determined face in the window glass. If Daniel or anyone from Sterling Capital ever asks about Oakhaven, the answer is always the same. The sale fell through, the sellers were impossible. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Mrs. Sterling. You have a very sophisticated game plan. Clara hung up, feeling the first genuine stirring of power she had felt in months. The injustice of his infidelity, which she had yet to fully confirm, but the suspicion was a heavy, suffocating blanket, was already giving way to a new kind of ambition. She wasn't just planning a divorce. She was planning an exodus. She was building a future for her child, one brick, one secret purchase, at a time. Oakhaven was not a liability. It was her liberation. And Daniel, in his blind arrogance, had just handed her the perfect place to execute her revenge. She had moved the pieces. Now she just had to wait for Daniel to make his own predictable, fatal move. The golden cage was about to open, for her freedom and for his capture. Daniel's growing distance metastasized into outright secrecy over the next 2 weeks. He began locking his phone, answering calls with hurried whispers in the adjacent study, and even canceled their obligatory weekly dinner with Clara's business associates, citing an impromptu, crucial business trip to the West Coast. Clara knew better. She wasn't a woman given to petty snooping, but the sheer disrespect inherent in his deception, especially with their child on the way, forced her hand. She contacted Marcus, a trusted, though expensive, digital forensics specialist she had known since her college days. She asked him to perform a discreet audit of Daniel's corporate travel records and email metadata, explicitly assuring him that the matter was a pre-nuptial agreement security review. The lie tasted foul, but necessary. Marcus's report, delivered via an encrypted channel 3 days later, was succinct and devastating. Daniel's supposed West Coast trip was a fiction. The travel itinerary he had meticulously shown her, a flight to San Francisco followed by a high-profile meeting schedule, was a copy of a previous trip's itinerary, slightly altered. His actual activity showed a complete void in corporate travel, replaced by a suspicious cluster of short-stay luxury hotel bookings within a 200-mile radius of Chicago. The most damning evidence, however, was in the metadata of a seemingly innocuous attachment, a PDF about a potential merger with a small tech firm. Buried deep in the document properties, Marcus had found a trail of communication leading not to a CEO or a lawyer, but to a private, encrypted messaging account registered under the pseudonym Sarah. Clara, her heart heavy but her mind terrifyingly clear, then cross-referenced Daniel's credit card statements that Marcus had also discreetly accessed. The purchase patterns immediately painted a picture: high-end jewelry, ridiculously priced lingerie, and, tellingly, multiple large payments to a boutique floral shop specializing in exotic blooms, all delivered to a specific private residence address in a trendy, newly developed neighborhood. A quick search of the address revealed the mistress, Serafina Vance. Serafina was a rising star in a rival investment consulting firm, ironically, one that Daniel had once tried and failed to acquire. She was young, driven, and stunningly beautiful in the predatory way only true ambition can make a woman. The clear injustice of the situation. Daniel risking their family, their legacy, and their child's future for a woman who was essentially a corporate competitor, fueled Clara's cold resolve. This wasn't just about sex. This was about Daniel's need for ego gratification and conquest, even at home. While Daniel was immersed in his web of lies, Clara was finalizing her acquisition. Oakhaven Manor was hers. The closing process had been a masterclass in covert finance. Clara used the equity from her private blue-chip stock portfolio, routing the payment through Aegis Holdings, an offshore holding company registered in a jurisdiction that prized client confidentiality. Her lawyer, a formidable, silver-haired woman named Eleanor Dubois, ensured every piece of paper was signed off-site and delivered by courier, circumventing Daniel's security detail and administrative staff entirely. "The deed is signed, Clara," Eleanor announced over a secure line. "As of 9:00 a.m. this morning, Oakhaven Manor is entirely under the ownership of Aegis Holdings, and by extension you. No liens, no mortgages, just a spectacular empty house." Clara looked at the ultrasound photo again. "It's not empty, Eleanor. It's a home waiting for its inhabitants, and I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to draw up 2 documents. First, a standard, non-contested, at-fault divorce filing, citing abandonment and extreme mental cruelty. I need it dated for 2 weeks from now and ready to be served immediately. Second, I need a detailed, unassailable financial document based on the full scope of Daniel's current leveraged buyout. I need to know precisely where his weakest points are, where a minor, well-timed move could cause maximum instability." Eleanor paused, her breath catching. "Clara, Daniel is leveraged almost 50-1 on the capstone deal. If that falls through—" "Exactly," Clara said, her voice like ice. "I need the blueprint for the collapse. He needs to realize that when he chose to destroy his marriage, he also chose to destroy his financial life. He must learn that the golden cage was built on his foundation, but the locks were changed with my keys." In the solitude of the golden cage, Clara began her preparations for the final confrontation. She hired a team of decorators and movers, swearing them all to absolute secrecy under ironclad non-disclosure agreements, citing a high-profile client security mandate. Over the next week, she methodically moved her most cherished personal belongings, heirlooms, photo albums, her grandmother's piano, the antique cradle, out of the penthouse and into Oakhaven. She also learned, through Serafina's social media, which in a stunning lapse of judgment Serafina kept public, that Daniel had been planning a romantic getaway for the upcoming weekend. Serafina's posts were coy but unmistakable. Photos of new luggage, hints of a surprise destination, and one photograph of an ornate, antique key fob tagged with the location Oakhaven. It was almost too easy. Clara smiled, a chilling, triumphant curve of the lips. Daniel hadn't just discussed Oakhaven. He had secretly secured a short-term rental of it, or so he thought, believing it was the perfect, distant, and utterly private locale for his adulterous retreat. He had probably bribed a listing agent, or perhaps even the property management firm, to arrange a weekend stay without the owner's knowledge or consent. Daniel loved the thrill of obtaining the impossible. He had no idea the impossible was now legally hers. She knew exactly how Daniel operated, the grand gesture, the over-the-top display of wealth and dominance. He would show Serafina a place he had previously forbidden Clara to even mention, effectively proving his contempt for his wife and his power over his mistress. Clara checked the calendar. Friday. That was when Daniel was scheduled to fly to the West Coast. Instead, she knew he would be checking into his new, temporary love nest. She made her final call to Evelyn Shaw, the realtor. "Evelyn, I need one last thing. I need the security codes changed and all staff dismissed for the weekend. I want Oakhaven entirely vacant, and I need the main gate keypad reset to a new code, a simple one." "What code?" Evelyn asked, pen poised. Clara looked down at her pregnant belly and whispered the due date of her child. 9/2024, my new beginning. The web was complete. The bait was set. All that remained was for the sterling to swim right into the snare. Clara, sitting alone in the silence of the nearly empty golden cage, knew the injustice was about to be corrected. Not with tears, but with cold, financial, and emotional precision. The transfer of Oakhaven Manor was not merely a real estate transaction, it was a testament to Clara's quiet, long-suppressed ambition and her innate capacity for strategic resilience. Daniel had always treated her finances as a secondary school fund, a pleasant allowance for gowns and galas. This profound underestimation had given Clara the anonymity of a ghost, allowing her to build a financial fortress in plain sight. The funds for the purchase originated from her grandmother, the formidable matriarch Hawthorne, a woman who had spent her life navigating and outmaneuvering the very patriarchal structures Daniel embodied. Before her death, she had transferred the bulk of her diversified portfolio, including blue-chip stocks and commercial real estate holdings, into a blind trust managed by a private Swiss bank, with Clara as the sole irrevocable beneficiary. The catch: the trust was only accessible using Clara's maiden name and specific biannual verification codes. Daniel had neither. Clara's lawyer, Eleanor Dubois, now sat across from her in a discreet meeting room at a private club, reviewing the final documentation. The Oakhaven purchase had been finalized under the corporate veil of Aegis Holdings, a limited liability company that, on paper, was owned by a trustee in the Cayman Islands, the true beneficiary remaining confidential. The total transfer, including closing costs and the requisite fees to ensure the immediate, quiet departure of the sellers, came to $18.5 million, Eleanor confirmed, sliding a final, glossy deed across the table. "It's a magnificent piece of property, Clara, but the speed and silence of this acquisition, it's the move of a predator, not a victim." Clara gave a faint, chilling smile. "I've learned from the best, Eleanor. Daniel has spent years teaching me how to structure an acquisition, how to leverage silence, and how to strike when the target is most vulnerable. He just never expected I would be the one applying the lesson." Her motivation was complex, a tapestry woven from betrayal, maternal protectiveness, and an intense desire for authenticity. Oakhaven wasn't just a house, it was the antithesis of the golden cage. The penthouse was Daniel's monument to sterile, cold wealth. Oakhaven, with its imperfections, its overgrown gardens, and its history, represented roots, permanence, and genuine family life, the life she was determined to give her child. It was personal growth expressed in brick and mortar. Over the next few days, Clara began to execute the second, more painful phase of her plan: severing Daniel's financial lifelines. Using the detailed report Eleanor had compiled, Clara learned that Daniel's entire capstone leveraged buyout was dependent on a series of short-term institutional loans, all set to mature within the next 90 days. The covenants were tight, and any significant market volatility or, more critically, a significant, unexpected outflow of Sterling Capital's liquid reserves could trigger a margin call. Clara, acting through Aegis Holdings, didn't need to attack the deal directly. She just needed to introduce instability. She instructed her Swiss broker to discreetly liquidate a portion of her holdings, and then, using a series of anonymous, high-volume transactions, began to short-sell a few minor, but strategically important, sister companies to the capstone acquisition target. This was not illegal. It was merely aggressive market manipulation. The ripple effect was immediate. The associated stock prices dipped, sending a minor tremor through the market. Daniel, already stretched thin, would see this as market volatility, a standard hazard of a large deal. He wouldn't for a moment suspect the source was his own pregnant wife. He would simply be forced to divert increasingly large sums of liquid capital to bolster his positions, draining Sterling Capital's reserves just enough to make the institutional lenders nervous. The psychological warfare was subtle but effective. Clara was creating the financial equivalent of a tripwire, ensuring that when the divorce papers were served, Daniel would not just lose a wife, but he would also be staring down the barrel of a crippling business collapse. As the weekend approached, Clara oversaw the final touches at Oakhaven. She had intentionally left the main floor mostly empty, save for a few key pieces: a magnificent, antique writing desk in the sunroom, and a single plush velvet chair in the library. She did, however, fully furnish the master suite on the third floor, her future nursery and her sanctuary. She also made a crucial administrative change. Daniel, in his arrogance, had likely used his company's expense account to arrange the rental of Oakhaven. This meant he had probably dealt with a junior employee at the property management firm. Clara, leveraging her status as the actual new owner, had contacted the CEO of the management firm herself. "I am the new owner of Oakhaven, effective immediately," she had informed him. "The previous rental agreement made this week is invalid, as the previous owner no longer has the authority to lease. I will not seek to recoup the short-term rental fee, but I expect complete silence. If the individual who booked the rental shows up this weekend, I want their key code to the gate to work, but I want their access to the house itself locked down. They are to be allowed access to the grounds, but the moment they attempt to enter the property, I want the security alarm to blare for a solid minute, and then the door to remain locked." The CEO, stunned by the sheer ruthlessness of the new owner, immediately complied. An $18.5 million cash deal commanded respect and absolute discretion. On Thursday night, Daniel came home late. He was tense, distracted, and smelled faintly of Serafina's signature perfume, a scent Clara had identified months ago. He slipped into the bedroom, already half undressed. "Clara," he murmured, not looking at her. "My flight is early tomorrow. A crisis in Palo Alto. I'll be back Sunday evening. Don't worry about me. I'll call." "Palo Alto," Clara repeated softly, her voice smooth and devoid of inflection. "Have a productive trip, Daniel." She watched him sleep for a few hours, a hollow man dreaming of a hollow victory. Before dawn, she rose, dressed in a simple, elegant maternity dress, and gathered her overnight bag. She left a single, crisp white envelope propped against his bedside clock. Inside was an official letter bearing the letterhead of Aegis Holdings, Leonard, simply stating, "Notice of ownership, Oakhaven Manor. Access revoked." She quietly slipped out of the golden cage for the last time as Daniel's wife. The mansion was calling. The trap was set. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that felt ripe for secret rendezvous and grand gestures. Daniel Sterling was a man consumed by the thrill of the illicit. Lying to Clara, while mildly stressful, was a necessary evil. He saw his affair with Serafina Vance not as a moral failing, but as a strategic extension of his professional success. The ability to acquire what he wanted, when he wanted it, regardless of the consequences. He hadn't flown to Palo Alto. Instead, he had taken a discreet private helicopter charter an hour outside of the city, meeting Serafina in a small, unmarked sedan he had rented under a subsidiary company's name. The air in the car was thick with anticipation. Serafina was electric, her excitement palpable. She wore a sleek, impossibly short designer dress, her ambition glowing as brightly as the diamond necklace Daniel had bought her. "Daniel, you are incredible," Serafina purred, running her hand along his thigh. "Oakhaven, I looked up the history. It's legendary. And you casually acquire a weekend there. How did you even manage it?" Daniel swelled with pride. He loved this woman's admiration. It was unburdened by the weariness and unspoken disappointment that had begun to define Clara's gaze. "A little incentive went a long way," he chuckled, thinking of the hefty bribe he'd slipped to the property management assistant. He genuinely believed he had secured the mansion for the weekend, completely unauthorized, a testament to his sheer power. "It's totally off the grid, Serafina. No staff, no neighbors, just us and 30 acres of privacy. We deserve this." He steered the car up the long, winding drive, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. Ahead, the magnificent wrought iron gates of Oakhaven appeared, framed by towering oaks, their branches already showing the brilliant red and gold of early autumn. "The place is immense," Serafina breathed, pulling out her phone for a dramatic Instagram story. Daniel slowed the car to approach the electronic keypad at the gate. He punched in the code he had memorized from the property manager's hastily scribbled note, 09251024. He smiled, feeling the thrill of the transgression. It was an arbitrary code, but easy to remember. Click. The heavy gates swung inward with a low, satisfying groan of machinery. "See?" Daniel smirked. "Smooth as butter. The Sterling effect." They drove up the long, sweeping driveway, the mansion growing larger and more imposing with every yard. It was breathtaking. A fortress of red brick and white trim, adorned with gables, turrets, and endless banks of leaded glass windows that seemed to watch their approach with ancient, silent judgment. Inside the mansion, Clara was waiting. She wasn't hiding. She was positioned. She had spent the day transforming one small section of the vast library. She'd set up the antique writing desk and placed her laptop on it. The screen displayed two things: the real-time feed from the estate's exterior security cameras, showing Daniel's car parked beneath the portico, and a complex financial dashboard tracking the performance of the short-sold sister companies. Both were moving exactly as she had predicted. Clara took a deep, centering breath, placing a protective hand over her belly. She was dressed in a tailored, flowing crimson dress, a striking contrast to the neutral, muted colors she usually wore for Daniel's benefit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon, and her face was a mask of cold, deliberate calm. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the steel of a woman who had nothing left to lose but her dignity, and who was determined to retain every ounce of it. She heard the car doors slam outside, followed by Serafina's high-pitched, excited laugh. Clara checked her watch, 4:30 p.m., right on schedule. Right. She moved silently to the main entrance hall, positioning herself just out of sight in the grand, shadowy vestibule. Daniel and Serafina mounted the steps to the portico. Daniel confidently slid a magnetic keycard, which he had also obtained illicitly, into the exterior lock mechanism on the mahogany door. He waited for the green light, but nothing happened. He tried again. "What's wrong?" Serafina whispered, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. "It's an old system," Daniel muttered, slightly annoyed that his flawless plan was being hampered by faulty technology. He tried the card a third time, jiggling the handle. Suddenly, a loud, piercing alarm shrieked, a high, continuous wail that echoed across the quiet acres. It was the security system, triggered by an unauthorized, repeated attempt to enter the main house. It blared for a solid minute, exactly as Clara had requested, shaking the foundations of the old house. Daniel, mortified, jerked the key out and looked around wildly. "The security system must have reset, damn it! Hold on, I'll call the guy. I told him to deactivate everything." Serafina was already panicking, her previous excitement replaced by fear. "Daniel, what if the owners are here? This is a lot of noise. We should leave." No, Serafina, calm down. The owner is a trust in the Caymans. They don't monitor this place. It's an old system glitch. It'll be fine." The alarm abruptly cut off. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. Daniel, red-faced, tried the keycard one last time. Still locked. He fumbled in his jacket pocket, pulling out a set of large, ornate skeleton keys he'd also procured, believing they were an ancient, reliable backup. He selected the largest one and inserted it into the massive lock. He turned it hard. Click. The tumblers shifted. The lock mechanism gave way. Daniel beamed at Serafina, his confidence momentarily restored. "See? Nothing a little muscle can't fix. Come on, my love. Our kingdom awaits." He pushed the heavy mahogany door inward. It swung open to reveal the cavernous, silent entrance hall. Sunlight poured through the fanlight window above, illuminating the polished marble floor. Daniel stepped across the threshold, Serafina right behind him, her shoes clicking loudly on the stone. He took a proprietorial breath of the antique air, ready to claim his prize. And then he stopped dead. Standing at the base of the sweeping central staircase, framed perfectly against the shadows of the vestibule, was Clara. She was devastatingly composed, her hands resting lightly on her pregnant belly, her crimson dress a shocking splash of color against the neutral backdrop. Her eyes, those beautiful, intelligent eyes he had taken for granted, were cold, clear, and focused entirely on him. The gaze of an executioner. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rapid, shallow breathing of Serafina Vance, who gasped and stumbled back, dropping her designer handbag. Daniel Sterling's world compressed instantly into a single, agonizing point of shock. All his carefully constructed lies, the fictitious West Coast trip, the bribed property manager, the assured privacy of the illicit weekend, crumbled in the face of the single, unassailable fact of his wife's presence. "Clara," he managed, the name a dry, choking sound in his throat. His mind, usually sharp and calculating, was a whirl of frantic, impossible questions. How? Why? How did she know? Serafina Vance, recognizing the woman Daniel had dismissed as his meek, pregnant liability, was paralyzed. The reality of the affair, previously confined to anonymous hotel suites and whispered calls, was suddenly exposed in the brutal, unforgiving light of a grand mansion. The sheer, terrifying scale of the betrayal was made instantly manifest. Clara finally spoke, her voice calm, measured, and resonating with an authority Daniel had never heard from her before. It wasn't the voice of a hysterical wife. It was the voice of a CEO addressing a catastrophic audit failure. "Welcome, Daniel," she said, stepping fully into the light. She gestured around the echoing, magnificent hall. "I hope your journey from Palo Alto was restful. I took the liberty of greeting you myself. I must admit, I was slightly concerned when the alarm system seemed to object to your entry." Daniel's panic began to give way to a flicker of his old arrogance. He stepped forward, forcing a look of confusion and indignation. "What in the hell is this, Clara? What game are you playing? This is an invasion of privacy. I rented this place for a corporate retreat. How did you even get in?" He deliberately avoided acknowledging Serafina, who was now scrambling to pick up her dropped lipstick and phone. Clara simply raised an elegant, disbelieving eyebrow. "A corporate retreat, Daniel? With Ms. Vance? Are you planning a hostile takeover of her affections? If so, Serafina, I suggest you review the fine print. His hostile takeovers tend to leave the target completely bankrupt." Serafina, finally finding her voice, stepped out from behind Daniel's shoulder, attempting a semblance of dignity. "Daniel, what is going on? Why is your wife here? You told me she was indisposed back in the city." "She is not indisposed, Serafina," Clara interjected, her gaze locking onto the mistress, dismissing Daniel entirely. "She is standing in the house that she owns. She is standing on the grounds that she purchased, fully and completely, 10 days ago. This is not a rental. This is not a retreat. This is my property, and you, both of you, are trespassing." The twist hit Daniel with the force of a physical blow. He stumbled back a step, colliding with the door. "That's insane, Clara. That's a lie. I saw the listing myself. It sold to a holding company, Aegis. You're lying to try and create a scene." Clara walked slowly toward the writing desk she had prepared, her movement deliberate and powerful, emphasizing her pregnancy and her resolve. She picked up the glossy deed and the letter she had left for him. "Aegis Holdings, Daniel," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that commanded attention. "I know you understand shell corporations. Aegis Holdings is a subsidiary of the Hawthorne Family Trust, which, as of my grandmother's passing, is solely owned and controlled by me. I am Aegis. I am the owner. And this is my notice of ownership." She tossed the 2 documents onto the polished marble floor at his feet. Daniel stared down at the crisp white paper. The logo of Aegis Holdings Limited was undeniable, as was the official notary seal on the deed. He felt the cold realization seep into his bones. His dismissiveness of Clara, his assumption that her wealth was insignificant or merged with his, had been the single largest miscalculation of his career. "You bought Oakhaven," he whispered, the sheer ambition and quiet ruthlessness of the act finally registering. "You bought the one thing I told you was a disastrous investment, the one place I forbade you to mention." "Yes, Daniel. I secured a sanctuary for my child," Clara corrected him. "And I secured the perfect stage for the end of our marriage. You see, Serafina," she turned back to the mistress, whose face had gone chalk white. "Daniel's preferred method of dealing with problems is acquisition and removal. He tried to acquire a brief fling here, removing himself from his obligations. But I made a different acquisition. I acquired the very ground upon which he planned his infidelity." The clear injustice of his actions was now reflected in the mirror of his own colossal professional failure. He wasn't just caught, he was outmaneuvered by the person he had belittled and betrayed. Daniel, the high-stakes dealmaker, resorted to his old manipulative tactics. "Clara, stop this. This is ridiculous. You are heavily pregnant. We can talk this through. This is embarrassing for both of us. Serafina, leave. Now. Clara, put the deed away. We'll go back to the penthouse and discuss the divorce with our lawyers, calmly." Clara didn't flinch. She simply looked toward the massive mahogany door. "Serafina Vance, I understand the desire for ambition. But ambition built on the ruins of another woman's marriage is a shaky foundation. I suggest you take your designer luggage and the cheap thrill of an illicit weekend and leave my property immediately. I will give you 5 minutes before I call the local police to report 2 unauthorized trespassers and a stolen keycard." Serafina, utterly defeated, glanced at Daniel, but his eyes were fixed on the floor, already calculating his next financial move, realizing the monumental shift in power. He had nothing left to offer her. She grabbed her bag and scurried out the open front door, slamming it behind her. The sound echoed like a period mark on their brief, tawdry chapter. Clara finally faced Daniel, the silence now broken only by the rapid, shallow breaths of the man who was once her husband. This was the moment of intense drama, the apex of the confrontation. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply opened her laptop on the writing desk, facing the screen toward him. "You asked how I got in, Daniel," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of all her accumulated pain and all her newly realized power. "I got in because I own the house. But the more pressing question, Daniel, is how you plan to get out of the other golden cage you've built, the one made entirely of debt." Daniel Sterling felt the blood drain from his face as he looked at the laptop screen. It wasn't the image of Serafina or any incriminating text messages that terrified him. It was the financial dashboard. The screens were filled with flashing red metrics, sharp downward arrows, and complex data models that spelled one thing: catastrophic failure. "What is this?" he demanded, taking a predatory step towards the desk, but stopping short, instinctively aware of the invisible barrier Clara had erected. "This is manipulated data. You have no access to my capstone files." "Oh, Daniel, darling," Clara said, her tone dangerously sweet. "You forget, I was a finance major before I became your decorative accessory, and more importantly, you forgot to audit the metadata of the consultants you hired during the initial due diligence phase. I had access to a great deal more than you assumed." She gestured to the screen, pointing to a series of highly volatile mid-cap stocks. "You've been pouring liquid assets into bolstering your positions on these subsidiaries for the past week, trying to stabilize the small market tremor that hit them. It's what triggered the panic on the institutional loan side, forcing you to use your personal reserve accounts." "A market tremor? That was just bad luck. It's called volatility, Clara. You wouldn't understand." "It wasn't bad luck, Daniel. It was me." Clara leaned forward, the crimson of her dress seeming to absorb the light in the dim hall. "I initiated that market tremor, Daniel. I used Aegis Holdings to quietly short-sell those mid-cap subsidiaries. It was a perfectly legal, well-timed, high-volume move, designed to make the institutional lenders, your partners in the capstone leveraged buyout, nervous enough to review the covenants. And they are reviewing them right now. The ultimate twist, the clear injustice returned tenfold, was the realization that his professional downfall was engineered by the woman he had dismissed as intellectually and financially irrelevant. He had spent his life acquiring, conquering, and using people. Now he was the target, and the conquest was absolute. "You shorted my company," he managed, his voice cracking with genuine professional horror. "You would risk my financial standing, our future, for spite?" "Your financial standing is already leveraged to the point of absurdity, Daniel. And there is no our future," Clara said, her eyes darkening. "As for spite? No. This is not spite. This is financial justice. This is security for my child. You traded loyalty for a cheap thrill with Serafina, a thrill you were stupid enough to try and take right here, on the property you convinced me was a disastrous investment. This is the consequence of that choice." She opened a folder on the antique desk. It contained a single stack of papers, pristine and legally binding. "I tried to talk to you about our marriage, about the baby, about Oakhaven," Clara continued, her voice gaining momentum. "And you dismissed me. You lied about Palo Alto, and you tried to sneak your mistress into my home, the home I secretly bought. That, Daniel, is extreme mental cruelty and abandonment. and it's the basis for this." She picked up the stack of papers and dropped them onto the marble floor, right next to the Oakhaven deed. The heavy, legal thud was deafening. "Those are the divorce papers, Daniel. They are non-negotiable and cite irrefutable fault, including this weekend's trespassing incident and the confirmed corporate affair with Ms. Vance. Eleanor Dubois is serving notice to your corporate headquarters and your personal lawyer this very minute. Everything is filed. The separation agreement, which you will sign, ensures I retain the entirety of the Hawthorne Family Trust, all its holdings including Aegis and Oakhaven Manor. You will retain your stake in Sterling Capital, which, thanks to the margin calls I've triggered this morning, will be utterly worthless by Monday morning." Daniel finally cracked. He lunged at the desk, slamming his fist down, sending the laptop skittering. "You manipulative bitch. You used my resources, my lifestyle to build your own nest egg, and then you destroyed me. You'll regret this, Clara. I'll fight you for everything, for custody, for every cent of community property." Clara didn't flinch at the venom, just the loud noise. She rubbed her belly gently and stepped back from the desk. "Fight me, Daniel," she challenged him softly. "Please do. I have a clean financial trail, a prenuptial agreement that honors my private trust, and an army of lawyers. You have a mountain of personal debt, the testimony of your own property manager about your illicit rental, and Serafina Vance's public social media trail to contend with. The only thing you have left to fight for is your reputation, which is about to be utterly shredded." She retrieved her laptop, placed it back on the desk, and opened the final document. A concise press release prepared by her public relations firm. The statement announcing our divorce will be released on Monday morning. It cites irreconcilable differences, confirms the infidelity, and attributes the immediate collapse of the Capstone acquisition to recent, undisclosed financial instability within Sterling Capital. I did not destroy you, Daniel. You chose to destroy yourself the minute you chose betrayal over family. I simply ensured you paid the fair market price for that choice." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, ornate key. Not the gate code key, but a key to the mahogany front door. She placed it gently on the desk. "This is your access key to Oakhaven," she said. "It is now legally mine. You have 1 hour to collect your things from the portico and vacate my property. If you are still here after 5:30 p.m., the police will escort you off the premises. Goodbye, Daniel. When you leave, don't forget to use the new gate code, 09252024. It's the due date of your child, a date you will now be paying for forever." She didn't wait for his response. She simply turned and walked away, her crimson dress a striking vision of power and resilience, ascending the grand staircase, leaving Daniel Sterling alone in the vast, empty hall, a fallen mogul staring at the ruins of his life, framed by the opulence he no longer owned. The fallout from the confrontation at Oakhaven was swift and brutal, playing out exactly as Clara had calculated. By Sunday evening, Daniel Sterling was not merely divorced, he was professionally crippled. The initial tremor Clara had orchestrated on the stock market escalated rapidly. The institutional lenders, spooked by the sudden volatility in the sister companies and the internal financial distress hinted at in Eleanor Dubois' discreet but aggressive legal correspondence, demanded immediate collateral from Sterling Capital. Daniel, who had drained his liquid reserves to stabilize the stock positions, could not meet the margin calls. The dominoes fell quickly. By Monday morning, his flagship Capstone leveraged buyout deal had collapsed entirely, triggering massive default clauses. The press release Clara had prepared hit the wire simultaneously, tying the undisclosed financial instability to the dissolution of his marriage amidst revelations of personal and professional misconduct. Daniel's reputation, the only currency he truly valued, was decimated. Clara, now safely ensconced in the quiet sanctuary of Oakhaven, watched the news reports with a detached, almost clinical calm. The injustice of his actions was now financially avenged. Eleanor Dubois arrived at Oakhaven later that week, the divorce finalized with astonishing speed, largely because Daniel's legal team advised him to cut his losses and minimize the public damage. "He signed everything, Clara," Eleanor reported, setting down a thick binder. "The prenup held, the Hawthorne Trust is intact, and you retained Oakhaven and all its holdings. He is left with his severely leveraged corporate entity and a mountain of personal debt from the failed acquisition. He's furious, but his fury is powerless now." Clara looked out over the rolling hills of the manor, the air clean and crisp. The stress of the last few weeks was beginning to lift, replaced by a profound sense of self-ownership. He built a life on the belief that he could control every variable, including me. He learned the painful lesson that the variable he ignored was the one that mattered most. The intense drama of the confrontation had been cathartic, but the aftermath was the true test of her resilience. She wasn't just a wealthy, single mother-to-be. She was a woman who had taken a massive, life-altering risk and won. But winning the battle didn't automatically heal the wounds. The emotional depth of the betrayal still occasionally surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. She had to shift her focus entirely. Her personal growth began with Oakhaven itself. The mansion, once a distant fantasy, now represented her fresh start. She decided not to simply live in it, but to revitalize it. She hired local craftsmen, gardeners, and architects to restore the estate, committing to sourcing materials and labor locally to inject warmth and community back into the grand, old structure. One of the first people she hired was Liam Chen, a brilliant, soft-spoken landscape architect known for integrating historical estates with sustainable, modern design principles. Liam was the antithesis of Daniel, observant, patient, and deeply rooted in authenticity. He didn't wear designer suits. He wore faded denim and boots, and his hands were permanently stained with soil. Liam and Clara spent hours walking the extensive grounds, planning the new life of Oakhaven. He listened to her vision. A working garden, a sprawling, safe place for her child to grow. A place of peace. He never asked about the abrupt divorce or Daniel's spectacular fall. He treated her with respect, treating her as the brilliant, strategic client she was, not the wronged wife the tabloids were currently painting. During one consultation in the Grand Library, Clara was reviewing blueprints for the new nursery wing. She paused, looking at Liam. "You've never asked about everything," she noted. Liam leaned against the antique writing desk, running his finger along the wood grain. "I don't need to, Clara. The house tells the story. You bought the most rooted, permanent piece of land in the county. You were looking for a sanctuary you could build yourself, a place that wouldn't feel like a cage. My job is just to make the landscape reflect the resilience you clearly possess." His simple, genuine observation, seeing her strength rather than her victimhood, was a profound validation. It was the first authentic connection she had felt with another adult in years. Clara smiled. A real, unforced smile. "The greatest irony of all this, Liam, is that Daniel always thought of Oakhaven as a liability. He saw the rot, the expense, the distance. He completely missed the value of its permanence. Permanence is only a liability to those who can't commit to maintenance," Liam replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It takes work, but the return is roots, stability, and beauty." Clara realized that Liam was describing the exact difference between her and Daniel's approach to life. Daniel pursued quick, leveraged, and ultimately unstable acquisitions, while she was committed to deep, quiet, lasting investment in her finances, in her estate, and now in her child. The emotional depth of the divorce, the profound sense of loss of the future she thought she had, was slowly being replaced by the invigorating challenge of building a new, honest life. The twists were over. The personal growth had begun. Oakhaven was no longer a stage for revenge, but a foundation for a new, resilient future. The final months of Clara's pregnancy were spent in a state of productive, peaceful anticipation within the revitalized walls of Oakhaven. The mansion was slowly shedding its Gothic austerity, infused with the warmth of Clara's own authentic design choices. Rich textiles, soft lighting, and an abundance of life. Flowers, potted plants, and the happy clamor of local workers. Daniel's fate served as a constant, sobering reminder of the importance of genuine worth over leveraged spectacle. Sterling Capital was forced into receivership. Daniel lost the penthouse, his corporate jet, and the majority of his personal fortune. He was, professionally, an outcast, deemed too volatile and financially unsound for serious dealings. The final twist of the knife was the public revelation that his affair with Serafina Vance had ended almost immediately after the confrontation. Serafina, realizing she had hitched her star to a falling giant, quickly and publicly distanced herself, reinforcing Clara's belief that Serafina's ambition, like Daniel's, was purely transactional. Clara, however, was soaring. Her business acuity, once overshadowed by Daniel's public profile, was now her greatest asset. She used the structure of Aegis Holdings to pivot, transforming it from a discreet wealth management tool into a boutique consultancy specializing in secure, long-term asset protection, leveraging the very lessons she had learned in her own divorce. Her reputation for ruthlessness and intelligence, cultivated by the Oakhaven maneuver, surprisingly made her highly sought after by wealthy women seeking protection from similar corporate wolves. Her relationship with Liam Chen, the landscape architect, deepened from professional consultation into a gentle, genuine connection. He was patient and respectful, qualities Daniel had long forgotten, if he'd ever possessed them. Their conversations were about the sustainable growth of the gardens, the history of the house, and the quiet joy of creation, not acquisition. One evening, shortly before her due date, Clara was sitting in the library, looking out at the meticulously lit grounds. Liam was there, reviewing plans for the new irrigation system. "I realized something today," Clara said quietly, tracing the edge of the antique desk. "The whole reason Daniel was so dismissive of Oakhaven, and of me, was because he couldn't see the intrinsic value. He only understood what he could leverage or what he could control. He couldn't control me, and he couldn't leverage a century-old mansion. He needed everything to be new, cold, and transactional." "True value isn't flashy, Clara," Liam responded, without looking up from his plans. "It's in the underlying structure, the roots." Clara's heart warmed. It was that simple, authentic observation that solidified their bond. Liam didn't see her as a victim or a trophy. He saw her as a powerful, resilient woman building a meaningful life. The romantic fiction was beginning to move away from the melodrama of betrayal and toward the quiet, powerful truth of connection and shared values. A few weeks later, her child, a healthy baby boy named Leo, was born in a quiet, nearby hospital. When Clara and Leo returned to Oakhaven, the nursery, painted in soft, calming shades and overlooking the spectacular, newly restored formal garden, felt exactly like the sanctuary she had fought for. It was a complete, profound new beginning. Liam was the first visitor, bringing not flowers, but a small, perfectly carved wooden bird meant to hang over the cradle. "A symbol of flight and home," he explained simply, his eyes radiating warmth. In that moment, Clara felt the final piece of the shattered puzzle fall into place. The resilience she had discovered was not just about overcoming Daniel, it was about defining her own worth. The ambition she had suppressed was not about wealth, it was about building an authentic foundation for her son. The intense drama of her revenge had cleared the slate, allowing her to finally experience a connection based on truth, not manipulation. The last trace of Daniel's memory was purged when she decided to fully dissolve Aegis Holdings, transferring Oakhaven's ownership directly to the name Clara Hawthorne. No more corporate veils, no more pretenses. This was her home, her name, her legacy. The great injustice had been corrected, and the personal growth was fully realized. The mansion, once the scene of Daniel's greatest blunder, had become Clara's greatest triumph. It was a physical manifestation of her strength, a beautiful, solid, permanent reminder that sometimes the only way to escape the cage is to buy the entire estate and change the locks. Clara, holding her son and looking at the gentle, steady man across the room, knew she was not just surviving. She was finally, authentically, thriving. Clara's story is a powerful reminder that true resilience is not found in dramatic outbursts or vengeful tears, but in the quiet, strategic assertion of self-worth. Daniel Sterling assumed his pregnant wife was a passive element in his life, a luxury he could afford to neglect. He learned too late that the woman he dismissed was the architect of his financial downfall, proving that the greatest liability in any transaction is always the profound underestimation of your opposition. The mansion, Oakhaven, ceased being a scene of betrayal and became a metaphor for authentic, deeply rooted security. When you build your life on genuine values, love, permanence, and self-reliance, no amount of external drama can shake your foundation. Remember to invest in what truly lasts, because the golden cage only holds the one who thinks they own the key. If Clara's journey of ambition, resilience, and finding authentic connection resonated with you, please hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs a dose of inspiration. Let us know in the comments below. On a scale of 0 to 10, how satisfying was Clara's ultimate reveal? And of course, subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and dramatic justice.